Hi, welcome to Sessions with Bob and Lena. I'm Bob Gordon.
And I'm Lena Derhali, and you are listening to Socially Distant Singles.
And tonight we actually have three guests joining us who are singles practicing social distancing in this age of COVID-19. And we thought since we did a previous session on couples and COVID, we would do one about individuals and singles, people that are living alone, or even if not living alone, are single in this. And we thought we'd have you guys, you guests, just introduce yourselves by telling us anything you'd like us to know or like our listeners to know about you.
We'll start with Grace, our first guest. So Grace, anything that you think people should know about you and any specific challenges or accomplishments or that you've noticed?
Hi, I'm Grace Crayer. I'm 27. I live and work in Washington, D.C. In my life, I've had 35 different roommates, and I now finally live alone, which was something I was really excited about when I, moved into my current place. I'm an introvert, but I'm a really friendly introvert, so it's been hard to not be able to be around people, but I think the extroverts probably have it a lot worse right now.
Okay, and we'll go to Johnny. Johnny's our second guest. What do you want people to know about yourself and some of the things you're challenged with now?
I think I just want to introduce myself. I'm Johnny. I'm a musician and music producer in New York City area in Westchester County. I also do a lot of political commentary online as well on YouTube and on my Instagram and everything. And now also an aspiring legal scholar, if you will. But I guess, living with COVID right now, I think the biggest challenge that I'm kind of facing is really just the personal challenge and seeing like a lot of family members who are in the healthcare industry and seeing how they have to operate and how to, I guess, realign family relations given all that's going on. So
Yeah, you're from a family of physicians.
yeah, and even my sister, who was my roommate, or is my roommate, she is the director of a wound care facility in a hospital, and also outside of New York City. And figuring out how to socially distance ourselves with each other, and then also coming back home and helping my parents with the family business and everything. It's been quite an interesting 2 months so far.
Okay, so then we'll go to Joe. Joe is our third guest tonight.
Thanks. I'm Joe D'Antonio. I am 23 years old, currently living in the Washington, D.C. metro area. I would say I would describe myself as an extrovert, though I also think that sometimes those terms kind of get applied in weird ways. For me, I have no problems with talking to people, but I do need a cool down time after I've been particularly socially active for a long period of time. When things first started, I was looking forward to perhaps an extended cool down time to kind of take time to intentionally get in touch with myself. But now that it has lasted for 2 months at this point for me, I have gotten to know myself as much as I feel that I need, and I would like to see other people. So at my job, I am a program assistant for criminal justice and election integrity for the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which is a Quaker lobbying organization. And during this time, it's a very politically active time. A lot of people have commented that Congress has done more in these 2 months than they usually do in a session, which has led to my work being in some ways more rewarding than ever because we get a lot more done now. Just a lot more happening, a lot more action. But then on the other hand, also can sometimes be more overwhelming than ever because things are coming and coming and coming at a pace that they haven't before. So that's sort of been where I'm at with this whole socially distanced process.
Mm-hmm. And Bob, you are living alone too. So anything that you want to say about your experience before we ask more questions?
Yeah, I am a confirmed extrovert, in the technical sense that I get my energy from and I get my energy from contact with humans. So I'm not getting a lot of that, and I think I've been shocked that it hasn't been as horrible as I feared. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed to say, like, I really miss particular people, but as I've said a couple of times, I could get used to working from my couch because normally I'd be in an office seeing clients, but I still, and may just be that the contact I get through the internet, through what we do through Zoom, and I'm seeing a little sign that says my internet connection is unstable, so I hope I didn't just freeze everybody. But I'm missing my kids. I have 3 kids in town that I'm not seeing much of, and that's, I think, what bothers me the most, because I'm keeping in touch with people in some ways more than I have in a long time, and I hear there's a lot of that going around. What about you, Lena?
Well, I'm living with young kids and a husband, so, but I do know a lot of people that are on their own in this time. And I think you touched on an interesting aspect that I would also throw to our guests is some singles say that they actually are feeling more connected to people than ever because all of a sudden people have time for them. Whereas they feel, people are very busy right now, or before COVID, before quarantine, everybody's really busy, and now everyone's at home. So there's this concerted effort to have these Zoom nights or happy hours with people that you haven't even spoken to in years, reunions, all of this kind of thing. I know for me personally, I have a weekly Friday night Zoom with my closest friends. And again, we were all busy leading different lives. This would never have happened before. So I feel more connected to them than I have in many, many years. So I would ask Grace, Johnny, and Joe, have you noticed as an upside of this, do you feel more connected or less connected to people? And I guess we can go to Grace first just to make it easier.
Sure. I think for the first month, I felt more connected to people. There was a lot of video chatting. And then after maybe 6 weeks of that, it just got really exhausting. Video chatting seems to take like more effort and concentration than a face-to-face conversation would. So I think I'm doing less of that now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm lucky in that I have family who also live in DC. So I've done some like socially distant hangs with family where we stay 6 feet apart and we wear face masks. And that's really great. But I really miss just spending time with friends where we're just like relaxed and watching TV together and not intent on conversing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I heard the term Zoom burnout last week. One of my friends bowed out of our Zoom chat because she was just having too many Zooms. So that's happening now too.
Yeah.
What about you, Johnny?
Well, on one hand, it's a blessing for sure. And I definitely think that when we all started doing this social distancing, Zoom was kind of a novelty. I know I never used it prior to COVID. And then, all of a sudden I'm getting all these invites with all these different groups of friends, and then family members, cousins, reunions, and all that stuff. And it's great when you have it. But I also like, just, you know, honestly, the last couple weeks it's died down a bit. And I don't know, without like inducing a pity party, it kind of feels a little lonely too after like getting through that Zoom burnout, if you will. But I do thoroughly enjoy it. Yeah.
What about you, Joe? Less or more connected to people?
I would say I think it's a bit of both,
Mm-hmm.
which may not be the most helpful answer, but I guess because the way it is, you know, what we're dealing with now is that the fact that all distance are equalized now. That, you know, the people who I am a block from, I am just as far away from as the people I'm 1,000 miles away from. So, for example, I've had a much easier time connecting with friends from home. So I'm originally from the Philadelphia area. And I have a lot of friends from college and who we all live in kind of, you know, far-flung regions of the world. So in that way, it's just as easy now to talk to them as it is to talk to my friends who live in the same neighborhood as I do. Whereas I feel less connected to the people who I live close to, because there's now no discernible difference between the people I'm close to the people I'm far from. I think, you know, Grace hit on something that I really agree with, which is that I've sort of termed it, there's no way to connect with people without a really clear intention. Like I remember talking with people at work about this, that at work now, in order to talk to someone, you have to Zoom them and like intentionally call them and have an intentional thing you want to do. Whereas it used to be at work, I could fairly easily, if I was, you know, just in the middle of the day, needed a break, I could go and just talk to someone at their desk, spend 5 minutes, walk away, and it's fine. Or when I'm hanging out with friends, we can all go to a bar together and just sit around, and we're fine to just, oh, you know, we just sit for a while, or we can go do something, but we don't have to worry about it. Whereas now, because it's so segmented, you have to like, okay, I'm giving an hour and I'm going to talk to these people and only these people. Next hour, these people, only these people. Mm-hmm. So there's not that spontaneity that we're used to in kind of everyday life.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have to use a lot of mental energy and emotional energy, and that can really drain you. Yeah, that all makes sense. Those are really good points, I think. What about loneliness and Bob, you want to say something?
I'm just noticing that Johnny has his hand up, and I wanted to see what you.
Oh, Johnny, yes.
Yeah,
hand up, Johnny, you go.
I think it was what Joe was saying about everyone needing some kind of intention to speak, and that's totally true, especially with, you know, casual relationships, maybe like coworkers and whatnot. But the one good thing that I am actually seeing is just more spontaneous kind of FaceTimes with people that you feel close to the heart with. Like I get like just random FaceTime sometimes from my cousins or some of my closest friends, and that's pretty cool to see as well. So
yeah, so there's good sides and bad sides, but it sounds like the longer this is going on, this way of life, the more draining it's getting. So the novelty was kind of cool at first, but now after a while, which again, I was thinking sort of spiraling into loneliness, you start to crave that human connection and those organic interactions, as Grace said, of just sitting around and not necessarily having to talk about anything. And so I think that, Bob, wouldn't you agree that when we think about singles, socially distanced singles, we think about loneliness and how that's affecting your mental health? And if anybody wants to speak to that, you know, go for it.
Yeah, I'm certainly feeling that, and certainly feeling isolated myself. And so I'm curious as to how the rest of you are coping when you do. I know a couple of you mentioned early on that, you know, you may be you may not be blatantly extroverted, but you're people friendly. I'm seeing some of us, like, I don't ever get Zoom fatigue. I have no idea what that feels like. Maybe it's because I'm not. Well, no, I am doing a lot of it because I see my clients now from home. So, but I know that this exists because I hear a lot of people talking about it. Like, and some people like, God, I cannot do a Zoom meeting, particularly not a group meeting with Zoom. There's something about it that just rankles people's neurons or something. It doesn't have that effect on me. But I wonder, and to finish what Lena was asking, how the three of you are handling the feelings of loneliness when you get it, and maybe we can go in the same order.
Yeah, I see Grace raising her hand. So
Yes. For me, the loneliness is a big aspect of it. And when I talk to the vast majority of people I know and talk to have other people who they live with. But for me in my life right now, every single person I interact with in person, I have to stay 6 feet away from, and we have to wear masks. I don't have anyone I can physically get near. So I'm really jealous of people who live with people they can hug right now. I miss being in the same space as somebody else and not feeling any level of fear.
do you worry that if this goes on too long, it's really going to take a toll on your mental health?
Oh, it definitely already is.
Yeah.
I mean, at first I was really, really up and down, and now I've leveled out, but I'm not happy right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really tough.
Yeah.
Johnny or Joe, do you have any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I think it was very lonely at first when I kind of realized the gravity of the situation. I remember just kind of watching Democracy Now! One day, and then Amy Goodman is giving the report around the world, and it's like Italy and France and Europe, and then Washington State, and then all of a sudden hit New York City, and that's when I was like, crap, I have to go help my parents out because this is hitting New York City, and I really need to make sure that my parents and the family business is okay. But I was also just so concerned, and the concern is just such a very personal one. The night before I kind of freaked out, I went to my jujitsu class, and like going there, that's like the least socially distant thing that you could do. And that was March 11th, and then March 12th, I'm like, no, this is super serious. I like no more closeness to people. But it was also like, my parents can't do this alone, so I had to come over, and I was kind of at first in the house with my parents, like, what am I doing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I sick somehow? Am I going to get them sick? And then it kind of mellowed out.
Oh, but I think we got
For the
Johnny
next couple of weeks,
freezing.
and then there was this kind of approach, like,
We lost you there, Johnny.
hello?
When things started
Do you
mellowed
hear-
out. Now we hear you.
Oh, I was saying that, yeah, things started to mellow out a bit. And I started to realize, look, we're like, everyone in my family, we are kind of in the same boat. We're all working in the medical field. We're all kind of in front of patients or physicians or someone in the field. And I think after like 2 weeks, I kind of let my guard down, and we're still socially distant within the house because you just don't know, like, we're still working. We've been working the entire time. But there's just kind of this rule, like, all right, I'm exposed, you're exposed, we're together at least. And so if any of us get it, we don't know who's the one that brought it in anyways. So we're maintaining the norms. But I think that kind of understanding with all of us, and it's a very particular situation being that we're all in the medical field, that we have kind of come over the loneliness aspect because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny, follow-up question. What does
Yeah.
what does social distancing with your family look like? In the house?
Well, yeah, and this is the other really interesting thing. I come from an Arab American family, and we are very close, affectionate. Even at 34 years of age, when I wake up in the morning and I go greet my parents in the kitchen, it feels inappropriate that I don't greet them without kisses on the cheek, and I'm not doing that. I'm not, hugging my parents. I love to hug my mom, or just the formalities of everything. Um, so that's completely eliminated. I would say that being socially distant is probably similar to a lot of people within the house that do have people who are working and like going outside every day. But again, I don't know how everyone else is doing it. We're just not like affectionate with each other, unfortunately. Affectionate physically with each other like we are normally.
And Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I know. I mean, something that has been new for me that I was not expecting was, so I am not a particularly physically affectionate person. Physical touch is not my love language. For me, like a handshake is pretty good. A hug, only with close friends, generally speaking. But I miss it more than I was expecting I would. Like when I first walked into this, I thought, well, I can cope pretty well. But right now, to have gone, 2 months at this point without, I've not touched another human in 2 months, which is just that's something that I wasn't ready for, and has been a sort of a gap in my life I was not prepared for, or thought that I would have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, like almost the socially distant but in-person visits are almost harder for me, because there is that, like, we're so close yet so far, that like 6 feet's really close, but it's not that close. And, I think as far as kind of the mental health impact of me being like, kind of having to cope with loneliness in a way that I'm not particularly used to, because, normally come the end of the day, I'm ready to just, take some time for myself. But, it's mostly been having to mentally transition myself from thinking this will be a sprint to a marathon. Because when I first, started, I was thinking, oh, this will be a sprint to the finish. I have to, kind of expend a lot of mental energy to get through this. But I'm now realizing I have to kind of, treat this like a marathon and slowly use my mental energy and conserve it until I can get, through and out.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a term the other day that I had not heard before, which, though we all know what it means, I think, but the term skin hunger, that, the hunger to just be close to another human being, whether it's cuddling or, the morning greeting, and what you said, Joe, about so close yet so far. I live in an apartment, a separate apartment within one of those honking big houses in Tacoma Park, Maryland. And there's a couple that own the house. And so I can hear them, couple about my age, and I'm fine until I hear them having fun and singing. I'm a musician too, so I've been doing some virtual open mics and stuff like that. But to hear them getting to play piano and sing together, or laugh, or garden outside, and I do get at least to say hello to them from a distance, which is nice. But when my son, my 22-year-old son, I believe that my local kids and my ex actually have had the virus already. they believe they have too, even though there were a couple of negative tests. Their doctors were like, this is COVID-19. Just assume it is, but don't act as if you're immune, so they're living like the rest of us do. But my older son does the grocery shopping for the two households, which is really kind. And so I get to see him kind of at a distance. We're wearing our masks, and it makes me so sad to see him and not be able to hug him and touch him. And so last couple of weekends ago, they both came over. One is 14 and the other is 22. And we all wore our masks, and we were on the porch, socially distant. And it was such a mixed blessing, because I was like, am I crazy? I don't, one of them's going out and grocery shopping. The other is kind of socially distantly hanging out with his friends. So I was like so torn between fear of like, damn, at my age, I really don't want to get this. And wanting to do it again the next day. So maybe that would be what I'd ask. I think maybe Joe has spoken to it a bit, but Grace and Johnny, whether you're encountering this kind of need to just have skin, whether it's friends or, dates or animals or whatever. Grace, go ahead.
So I've always heard the term skin hunger in the context of elderly people whose spouses have died and they live in care homes, and the only touch they get is like medical touch. They don't, and I've heard it in the context of, oh, this is why massage is really important for old people. And now I'm 27 and I'm like massaging my own back with my back cane. Wishing someone would do it for me. Yeah, I've definitely felt I miss hugging people, especially seeing I have seen my cousin and her 2 kids and her husband, and it's really hard to see the 2 little ones and not give them big hugs.
Yeah. Johnny, what about you? I mean, you are right now housed with relatives, but unable to touch. How would you describe this sense of skin hunger?
Yeah, it's this is the first time I'm actually hearing of the term. But as soon as you said skin hunger, I was like, oh, I mean, I know exactly what it is. I would say, I mean, it's tough because it's like it's so close, but yeah, just so far. So even just even just like a touch or a caress, like a pat on the shoulder from your mom. My mom, I'm living with my parents right now. It's just that could do so much in easing a skin hunger or whatever. But then even beyond that, I have so many not so many. I have a few other single friends as well, and just because you're single doesn't mean you don't go on dates, that you don't have an active sex life, that you're not proactively going out, touching, holding hands on dates, whatever it might be. And so I'm hearing from a lot of them as well that it's a real thing, even not just like the normal, like, oh, day to day, like, hey, how you doing, pat on the shoulder, but even the more intimate stuff, people are definitely kind of having skin hunger in that sense too.
I'm wondering if I'm the only one in the group who has sort of a dating significant other, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, or whatever, that I can't be in touch with, not even like close, because I'm generally not. She works at a hospital, so there's a bit more to be worried about. She's already gone into quarantine at least once, self-quarantined when she was exposed to somebody. She's not at the front lines, but we're both sort of wondering. It's back to what Joe was saying about the sprint versus the marathon. This could be a while for she and I. So at night, sometimes we'll have a little happy hour, and that's more about once a week because I don't want to be drinking every night. But and then we'll have some FaceTime, and then we'll watch TV together. And we've kind of taken to watching the show at the same time with our iPhones beside each other, seeing each other, watching it. And there's a sense of there's horrible skin hunger, but there's a sense of connection. I'm wondering if anybody has a similar situation that they're comfortable speaking about.
Might be just you, Bob.
Okay.
Joe?
I would say I am not in that situation where I have a significant other that of any seriousness, but I would say that a part of my life that has definitely been lacking is, I guess I would put myself in the single and ready to mingle category. And so, even though I would go, long stretches without a date or without, any kind of like intimate contact with another, still just that going out with that intention of like, okay, like I'm going to see who I meet tonight and, having some casual things with people. The fact that that is just not part of my life, in some ways it has, relieved some complications that come when, you have, half relationships and that kind of thing. But then also it has, a real, a part of my life that brought me a great deal of joy is not there anymore. So though it's a different kind of thing than, having a significant other I cannot, be with. There's still that a lacking in life in the romantic space as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have heard a lot of different approaches. I know a lot of people are on the apps and dating for siblings. I mean, my friends' siblings, I've heard stories that people have actually, met and done socially distant dates, whatever. If they end socially distant, I can't tell you, but I've noticed that people are kind of reaching their breaking point a little too and becoming a lot more lax about social distancing. So I've heard anecdotally from friends, they may be upset with different family members because different family members are thinking about the rules differently and maybe visiting each other and maybe staying under the same roof. And so I'm starting to see that people are finding ways around it, but it sounds like you guys are pretty strict about staying home, not, maybe not going on apps, not seeing people. And if you have, it sounds like it's been with those real nice guidelines of being 6 feet apart with masks. What do you guys think about other people, going on apps or doing that type, or would you consider it at some point, being cautious and maybe there's one person that you end up quarantining with at some point? I don't know if anyone wants to raise their hand. Or Grace.
So I was on the apps right before this. I had to self-quarantine a little bit earlier than most people here. I was like maybe 5 days ahead of everybody else because I was exposed to a confirmed case. But I had 3 dates scheduled the week I went into quarantine, and I canceled all of them. And at that point I thought, oh, I'll be back out in 2 weeks. And obviously that hasn't happened. So I have taken down my profiles. I'm not on the apps right now. I know some people who are video chat dating. I'm not quite there yet. I don't know. It doesn't seem, it's not important enough to me to do it, to video chat date. Maybe if we're, 6 months out and it's still like this or somewhat like this, I might consider it. And then, I don't know, it might get real fundamentalist Baptist real quick where it's like, well, we got to be exclusive if we're going to touch at all.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
There's actually a really interesting article by my favorite anthropologist, Helen Fisher. She does a lot of studies of the brain and love. I can't remember if it was New York Times or not, but she was basically advocating for socially distanced dating as being a really good thing because it forces you to bond in a way that, and I actually think about my own situation with my husband as we were long distance when we started dating. He lived in Austin, Texas at the time, and I was here in DC. And it was kind of nice. There was a lot of safety to that. Besides, we were introduced through mutual friends, but it was nice because for months we couldn't see each other. And so we really got to know each other over the phone. And as Helen Fisher says, love is something that takes time to happen. It's actually not, a lot of us think that we meet someone and sparks fly and that's the right person, but it's actually what really needs to happen is you need to really like someone and you need to really know someone to like someone. So this aspect of being forced to really get to know someone without this sexual, physical component being there and clouding everything could be beneficial. So not saying that you should go out and do that, but I thought it was just an interesting point. If it gets to that where you do want to go back out there, like that, there's probably some upsides to dating virtually during this time. Yes, Grace.
I was raised kind of evangelical in the purity movement, so it's not an unfamiliar notion to me. And I have thought about it, but there's a difference between moving slow physically and not being able to sit down to dinner with someone and look them in the eye and seeing what their body language is like in person. So I think that's my hang up about it.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what Grace was saying. It's, I know so many people are still on the apps and stuff, and I don't think that app life has changed in particular. I think that people are probably matching, meeting, getting to know each other still at the same rates, but definitely the physical aspect is gone, but it's not so much just the sexual aspect. It's definitely, like Grace just said, you're not in person. I think that, physical is so much more. I think there is a lot of stuff, attraction that can be assessed just by going out to dinner, by walking in the park, like if the couple likes to hold hands, that kind of thing. And that whole thing is missing. But back to, I think it was Lena that was talking about the differences that would come up within a household in terms of social distancing norms. I know for me personally, everything is kind of on hold until I realize, or until we get some kind of signal that things out there are fine. And it's only because I know that for the next couple of months, I have to be in a place with my parents who are both above the age of 60. And for me, it's like, all the apps, the dating life, going out with friends, going to jujitsu, like that's all great for me. I love doing that, but like the priority is making sure that everyone in my family is safe and healthy, at least until we know more about this disease. Because like, God forbid anyone gets it in my household, we don't know how anyone's going to react. So.
Yeah, which leads me to a question. So I think now I know more about how you would answer this, Johnny, but for Grace and Joe, I've wondered with younger, young, healthy people, for whom the, fatality rate would be very low. Why are you quarantining? Because you're afraid to get this disease? Because you're being socially responsible? Or because you've been told to? Or is it a combination of all of the above? And this time, let me start with Joe. What's motivating you to lock down?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I would say I think it's probably a little from all these columns. I think, I am, having looked at some of the data and hearing, like a lot of people talk about like, oh, it's a 2% for people under the age of 30 or something like that. I guess just for me, I'm not a gambling man. I don't ever want to roll a dice where one of the faces of the die says you die, no matter how big the dice is.
Mm.
And also, it just feels to me that it's the right thing to do. You know, that as much as it can be difficult sometimes, and I have been thinking about it as far as, because I know some friends of mine who are also, you know, singles, but more importantly are like socially distancing alone, have made the choice to open their group up. I know some people who have made that choice very intentionally. I know some people who have made that choice with less intentionality. So it kind of, you know, for me, it's back and forth, and it kind of links to the dating thing of, you know, like for me, like it's happened. I when this first started, I was on the apps, and then I've since stopped doing them because it happened a number of times where I would match with someone, we would talk for, you know, a while, have like a really good conversation, get to the point in the conversation where we would meet each other, like, okay, let's do dinner, or let's do lunch, or let's do whatever, and realize can't do that. So we get to that point in the conversation, goes, well, look me up in 6 months. Which at that, you know, after that happened to me for the third time, I was like, you know what, I'm out of this one. And I think it happened to a number of friends of mine who were in sort of half relationships, who were like, I'm talking with someone, maybe we'll go official, maybe we won't. And a lot of them had the same conversation with each other of, I like you, but I don't know if I lock down with you and only you for 2 months like you. So, you know, we'll see in 2 months or however long this is, let's see if we hook back up and the sparks fly again. But then I know some people who made the plunge in the other direction of, you know, I like you, and maybe I 2 months locked down with you like you. And I remember joking to a couple of them, like, you're either going to come out of this thing married or divorced. And it kind of, that's kind of what has happened with some of them. Some of them really regret that decision. Some of them are really happy they made it. So it's, you know, that's kind of where I am with, like, as far as going, if I were to go to meet someone right now, if I were on an, you know, if I'm on an app and I meet someone, I would have to, from this brief text conversation, know, okay, I'm going to 2 months lock down with you and only you like you. And that's very hard to tell over Tinder or Bumble.
So what's happening is like a reality show. Getting married at first sight, or being a bachelor. You see all this celebrity gossip. It's like, which Bachelor contestants are quarantining together, you know, all scandalous. So, but it's sort of what's happening in real life, is that people are doing what they normally wouldn't do. Like in a normal situation, people wouldn't say, hey, I'm going to lock down with you for 2 months. But now maybe it's forcing people to, like you said, maybe they're a gambler and you're not that type.
Grace? Oh, Grace, you're on mute.
Sorry. First, I'm a really big Bachelor fan, and I've been paying very careful attention to the news of who's quarantining together from the Bachelor
Kelly
franchise.
and Pilot Pete. That's all.
They're together now. Yeah. Wild. But as far as the rules and how seriously I'm taking them and why, I have not been following them as perfectly as I probably should be. I have gone for walks with people where, you know, we're probably more like 3 or 4 feet away than 6 feet away. And I'm not always wearing a mask on those walks. So I'm not following the rules perfectly. I am following them as well as I can while maintaining my mental health. And I'm following them because I go into the world with the, how can I best love my neighbors? And by doing my best to not become a carrier of this virus, I am loving my neighbors.
True. And is anyone doing any volunteer work? Because I know that lots of people I know are doing food drop-offs for people who are food insecure and things like that, which requires you to have some interaction with people. So to your point, Grace, sometimes in order to be good to others, we kind of have to break those norms a little. So I don't know if any of you have, I know Johnny's volunteering his time to his parents, and that's probably time consuming, but have you guys thought about doing something like volunteer work that would maybe even help a little bit ease the burden of the loneliness?
I know that I have, but very little in-person stuff. I've been keeping pretty much to myself. I know that, you know, through my church, I've been giving a lot more time. So I mean, I'm a Quaker. I'm a member of Friends Meeting of Washington here in DC. And I have really dived into, my religion has always been fairly important to my life. And it has become important to me in a new way. And I've been really giving myself to, you know, my meeting in a way that I have not otherwise, partially because now I have a lot more time to, you know, they're not competing with anything, but also because, you know, I want to be helping people. And then sort of the way I feel that I can best help people is to, you know, be a spiritual support for others. And that's been something that's been really helpful and you know, important to me.
How is that increased commitment and connection to them actually showing up? Like, is that, yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I would say Quakers are a really interesting group in that we are a very, what's often termed a low church. We're sort of the lowest of the low churches, which often translates to very low commitment levels. Like there are very few sort of restrictions for Quakers in the way that many other faiths have a lot of restrictions, which often translates to you know, less commitment to the faith broadly. But it also means that for us, it's translating our practice into online worship is very easy. Because, for example, Quakers don't have sacred spaces. So it's very easy for people to do worship in their homes and do worship as a community in their homes. So we have Zoom meeting for worships, which ends up looking very similar to this. And I think religion is always a source of hope and you know, comfort for people in difficult times. And it's been similar now. It's just that, you know, people have been able to come to our meeting more easily because they don't have to travel to do it. They can just, you know, show up online. And I think the members of the community have, and I can only speak for myself, that it's been, my spiritual experiences have been deepened by this because I've really been able to kind of fully give myself to the community and focus on my practice a lot more, because I've needed it. You know, it's you know, I don't know how I could get through this without the help of my meeting, and I think there are many others in a similar situation, both Quakers and people from other faiths.
Johnny, looks like you've got something to say about this.
No, I wanted to echo a bit of what Joe was saying. I grew up and I'm still practicing Orthodox Christian, very similar to the Catholic Church. But it's interesting because when we first started social distancing, we were in the Lenten period of the church, and during Great Lent, you know, as is tradition, there's a type of spiritual practice. So this was actually the first year in quite a few years I decided to participate in Great Lent. But I didn't do it the typical Orthodox Christian way, which I forget the rules. There's like Wednesday, Friday types of fasting, and you know, a lot of dogma, if you will. But so what I decided was that I was going to give up social media for Great Lent. So I gave up Facebook and I gave up Instagram and Snapchat and like, I forget, there's like others. But so I gave up the social media apps and even the profile pages so that I wouldn't get any notifications from anyone. And, you know, now that I'm thinking back about it, and I think I mentioned that the beginning of the social distancing was quite lonely. I think a lot of it had to do with, you know, not participating in those avenues. But as Lent went on, you know, the other part of the religious practice is you don't just give something up like, oh, I'm going to give it up and that's like good enough for the religion or for your relationship with God. But it's more give up, and how are you going to grow spiritually? So at the time that I gave it up, I was like, or during this social distancing that we're going through, I was like, all right, well, what are some better avenues to have fellowship with other people, with other, whether they're Orthodox Christian or not, just other people, and to have good relations with people. And that was, and so what I realized was I was more intently actually reaching out to people, calling people, checking in on people. And then that also started to translate into, all right, well, I'm now enjoying the church service that's going on through Facebook Live or whatever it might be. Um, and my dad is now like participating in like Bible study on a weekly basis. So sometimes I tune in with him uh, with that. But yeah, I guess it's definitely increased a spiritual practice, definitely for me. But I can definitely see how it's been similar for other people as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Grace.
Grace, I was just going to ask you spiritually what's happening.
I actually work at a church, and I have a master's in divinity. So this is really important to me. I'm an Episcopalian, and our faith is a very physical faith. I'm a Rite One Episcopalian, so we do the kneeling and the incense and the bells. And I haven't received the Eucharist in 2 months, and it's really hard. I really miss that physical part of my faith right now. We have been doing recorded services online, and we've been meeting for like noonday prayer over Zoom, and there are some evening prayers going on various weekdays. But I miss that physical aspect. And when Johnny was talking about Lent, I kind of still feel like it's Lent. Like I am still waiting for resurrection. It hasn't arrived for me yet.
So what do you think might be the greater spiritual purpose in this? And I guess I also want to tie that to the question of gratitude, because I think no matter what your situation is, many people that I've talked to, like this has caused them to reevaluate a lot about their life and to think about just the bigger picture of the world. How are we treating other people? There's so many ramifications from this disease. And so, what are you grateful for? What are you reflecting on? What are you reevaluating? Those are some things that I would ask all of you.
Could I just piggyback a little bit off of something that Grace said first?
Sure.
So she said that like it feels a little like Great Lent still, and that's totally right. I think the reason why it probably does is because I know in the Orthodox faith, the culmination of Great Lent is the celebration of Easter. And I don't want to get this into like a religious or spiritual conversation, but I think it's still like, all right, we celebrated Easter, but we didn't celebrate Easter with each other. And there wasn't like this, for me and my family, it's both religious and cultural. And, like I said, I come from a big fat Arab family, and, we get together on the holidays, we eat a lot. And it was died down this year. And my sister actually came over to my parents, and we all just kind of sat quite formally. It was a good spiritual practice in that, rather than being close physically with each other, I think what we tried to do was just let each other know how much we appreciated each other. And we were getting to the point where it's like, okay, the physical aspect is gone. How else do we show affection towards one another? And how do we fill in the gaps, I guess, in the larger scheme, back to Lena's question, in terms of realizing all the things that we don't have right now, we're trying to fill those gaps in many other ways. So,
Joe, what might you say about the great, if there's a greater purpose, or how are you making meaning of it from a spiritual perspective?
Yeah, I don't know. So I would say, spiritually, so Quakers, our big practice is what's called silent or waiting worship. And I have had so much silence. And I think that I have been able to have a much deeper relationship with myself during this time, that I can both have inward facing silence where I listen to myself, and then a more Quaker practice of this outward facing silence of listening either to, the Quaker term that many people use is the inner light of God, and that you're listening, to and for leadings from God. And, it's led me, the absence of certain things has led me to be more grateful for them. And also I have become more grateful for the presence of other things. The fact that I am able to live, on my own and socially distanced by myself is a gift, because I know plenty of people who are currently, we're dealing with it very much the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence kind of thing. I know friends of mine who are in group homes who would give anything to be in my position. And I know that I would give a lot to be in their position. So I think it's, I am immensely grateful for, being able to live the way I live, to be able to do my job locked down and not, have to be put at risk, and to, have access to, easy to get food, clean water, all of these things that, we all take for granted far too often. But then also the absence of, we just had Mother's Day last weekend and I couldn't go home to see my mother. And I have, become even more grateful for my family. And I've become even more grateful for my friends. And even though, my religious community has been able to transition online, I'm so grateful now for the times when we are together, because, Quakers end every meeting with shaking hands. It's a big thing it is that you shake hands and you greet the other person as fully a person. And we did it once without shaking hands before the lockdown happened, and that worked fine because we were still able to make eye contact with each other and gesture to each other in some way. But missing that feeling that we are a community together has, the absence of it has made me grateful for it in ways I didn't even know I could be.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, Grace, that you would say? I know we're getting tight on time, but about any larger meaning from a spiritual perspective about this pandemic?
I think it's obviously a tough time for everyone, but it's an opportunity to be present with one another in our own ash heaps, if you will. I've been so grateful. I'm kind of a complainer. I need to vent my frustration, and I am so grateful to have friends who will, pick up the phone and listen to me complain and not try to make it better, but we'll just listen and say, your feelings are valid and I'm here for you, and I'm sorry that sucks and I'm praying for you. Mm-hmm. It's a time for us all to be there for one another. And that's a really beautiful spiritual practice, whether or not, no matter your faith, being there for one another is pretty powerful. So I think it's an exercise in empathy.
And I think on that level, the larger purpose, or how I'm making meaning of it is, or the thing I can find some gratitude or appreciation about a pandemic is oneness. That's kind of my version of spirituality, is that there's just the one, and my spiritual community, we're meeting online. We used to meet once a month in my living room and, have spiritual dialogue. Now it's Zoom, and other meetings that I have that are of a spiritual bent. But to me, I think one of the profound revelations of this is how one we are. There's something that can sweep across the planet. And even though it favors people that are rich and can have their groceries delivered, and everybody can get it, and it can infect any community. It's in the White House, so that may be the gift, is that we really are, there's just the one race, and we're not impermeable, and what does that mean? And that's that sense of compassion and community. Lena, what about you? Before we close, how are you making meaning of the pandemic?
Oh gosh, you don't want to ask. I'll go on for hours.
Well, you
know
don't
me.
get to, so you're gonna have to.
I'm little Miss Social Justice. No, I mean, I'll be the first person to say that we needed to slow down. I'll be the first person to say that we're reversing global warming right now. Like, there's no pollution, and we have a chance now. I think my mother sent me something about all these scientists signing on to something the other day, I think from Denmark or something like that, that we have a chance now to really do something about, the things were not working before. And I put on my Instagram, that this was not a mental health utopia before. Going back to normal is not something that I personally want for my children, for their future. We were an instant gratification society, and not that it's saying that we shouldn't get on planes or travel anymore, anything like that. But I think we need to be way more intentional about the footprint, not just a carbon footprint, but the footprint we're leaving on the world. And that, again, we're all connected, that everybody deserves healthcare and everybody deserves a vaccine when we get it. And how are we taking care of our people? I really hope that these questions stick with people, and that we actually, I'm really worried that we're just going to go back to the way things were and forget about this, when a vaccine comes, and hopefully it will. So those are the things that I'm constantly thinking about. Is, I don't know, is there anything I can do as one person to try to, make sure that we don't go back to normal, where there was so much suffering, even in the US, where there really shouldn't be, but there's so much suffering all over the world. Anyway, I'm going to stop because I will go on and on and on. But I do have a final question for all four of you. Is, what is the first thing you would like to do as soon as this is over? Like, what do you want to do? Who are you going to hug? What are you going to do first? Whoever wants to go first.
I have a t-shirt, and it's really a jujitsu themed t-shirt where, like, someone is like choking someone out, like rear naked choke, but it says free hugs on it. I'm gonna wear it, and I'm just gonna go hug everyone. So free hugs when this is all done. I don't know when that's gonna happen. Oh, and I'm gonna go to my barber, by the way, who's amazing. But I've been cutting my own hair, and I think I'm doing a good job.
Looks good.
Thank you.
What about you, Grace?
I have a cousin who's expecting a baby this fall, and I really love little babies, so I'm looking forward to holding that baby.
Awesome. And Joe?
I'm gonna hug my mom. I mean, that's a very sentimental answer, but I think I didn't get to hug her on Mother's Day, and that really hurt. So just getting to go hug my mom, spend time with my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, just really getting to be with them, because I live apart from them now, and that distance has never felt more real than it has during this.
Mm-hmm. As a mom, I like to hear that. And Bob, what about you? And then we'll close out.
No, I definitely would take my boys, my local boys, out to dinner and a movie, and just hang out, and get some hugs, and then see my lady friend. Well, you didn't ask for the first 5 things, so I'll just go with that first.
You can do all of it in one day. How's that?
Yeah. So definitely some contact with those I love. and damn, I just want to go into a cafe and get some coffee and hang out with some people, I don't even care if I know them,
Yeah, without masks, hopefully one day.
How about you, Lena?
I don't know. I actually no. I will go to Bethesda Crab House. I love to crack crabs, and I will take my best friends, and I will go crack some crabs and sit outside, and that's probably the first thing I'll do.
Cool. Before we end, is there anything that anybody feels ought to be said?
I want to thank all of you for joining Bob and I, and for sharing a lot of your vulnerable thoughts. I think it's helpful for people to hear, to normalize everyone's experience. And I think a lot of people are going to hear it and it's really going to resonate with them. And I think you touched on a lot of things that were really important that I hadn't necessarily thought of. So thank you all. Thank you.
And I'm going to press the stop recording button so that we can do a little more informal goodbye before you all go away. So
Thank you for having us.
Pardon?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us.
And I want to our listeners, thank you for joining us, and we will keep them coming. Lena, any last thing for listeners?
See you next time, and be well.
Okay.